What's up, guys? Adam back again with RV Returners, coming at you for the lightning part of our Opus 6 review. So we're going to look at lightning. I think lightning was a very underrated element in Opus 5. It saw play at the beginning, and then it kind of, like, people just kind of stopped playing it for some reason, but still feel like it was very strong. So let's go ahead and look at the new lightning cards in this set and see if it's going to get even stronger. Alright, so first up we have a new Alcid, actually, but he's a backup, and he's not even Final Fantasy 12, he's actually Tactics Advanced 2. So when he enters the field, choose two forwards, opponent controls, dull them. So it's interesting that he has to actually choose two, not up to two. So he doesn't even go off unless you have two actual legal targets, which could be kind of annoying. He does cost three, so for that ability, it's not terrible. Like three on a backup. It's basically a Shiva on a backup, but in the lightning element. The issue is, are you really going to cut the current Alcid for this one? And I think the answer to that question is no. So I don't think he's terrible, but I don't think he's going to see any play, at least right now. But maybe, again, some form of a rotation might happen, and this guy might see play. We'll see. Next up, we got Arisha Al Rasha. She's a 2 CP backup for 1 lightning tap, discard a summon, search for a summon, add it to your hand. I think this card's actually pretty good. So it is a little bit expensive if you think about it. Like, you're basically paying 4 to search for a summon, and Terra kind of does that, but to a limited, like she can't search for any summon. Like she can only search for 5 or less. And this is any summon, which I think is great. So again, you can kind of toolbox your lightning summons now, and pitch a summon to search for that toolbox summon that you need in the right matchup. So, and it's a 2 CP backup, so I think it's very good. Next up, we got Adia. She's a 4 CP backup. Tap, put her in the break zone, choose one job witch in your break zone, play it onto the field. You can only use this ability during your turn. I think this card's actually good as well. Just being able to break her to bring her 6-drop into play could be really good, because a lot of times you're going to pitch that earlier, it's going to come off the top, and that's when you're going to feel good. But now this allows you to play this as a backup, break it, and put their 6-drop on the field, and also break in something. The only one thing that I will note is that when you're on 5 backups and you tap and break this and bring the 6-drop into play, it's going to put you on 4. So you're not really going to be able to hit that 5 CP range. You're only going to be able to hit 4 CP and lower, which I think will hit most targets that matter anyways. So I still think this is pretty good, and I think it will see play. Next up, we have a Stinney. He's the first Lightning Legendary of the set. He's a 5 CP, 8K. If you control 5 or more backups, he has haste. When he's blocked, break the blocking forward. And for 1 lightning, activate. He can attack again, and you can only use this ability during your turn. This guy is pretty insane. Probably going to be one of the chase legendaries of the set for sure. I'm sure his foil is going to look amazing. I mean, he's going to attack twice most turns. He probably is going to have haste if he wanted to have haste, because even if you can't get his first field ability online, you still have Red Mage in your deck more than likely, so you can give him haste. And then you don't want to block this guy, so it's going to be really hard to trade with him. The only things that we'll trade with him are things that are just kind of unbreakable without taking damage, like Vincent and Stola and things like that. So I think he's going to be very strong. I think a lot of people are going to be looking for him, and I think you're going to see him in a lot of lightning decks. Next up, we got the other Tinian. He's a 3 CP forward, 7K. You can only pay for him with CP produced by lightning backups, and he has haste and first strike. Again, he's on curve. He has 2 keywords. But he does have that drawback, kind of similar to the White Tiger, where you can only put him into play from your hand using actual backup CP. So that's going to kind of limit him, plus the fact that you have the other Stinney that we just went over that I think is just a better card. I don't think this guy's terrible, but I think the other card's going to overshadow him, and I think that the drawback that he has might kind of keep him out of seeing a lot of play. So, but I don't think he's terrible, and maybe like some Dragoon deck you might play him. Next up, we got Cain. He's a 9K 3 CP. When Dark Forward your opponent controls enters the field, they gain control of Cain. And when a Dark Forward you control is put from the field into the break zone, your opponent gains control of Cain. So, the more I think about Cain, I actually think he's pretty decent. The issue is Kamlanot sees a lot of play. So, if they steal your Cain, it's probably going to be a bad time. But if you know, like, kind of the deck list and you're familiar with the meta that's happening, you'll just pitch Cain. I think he's just a good one-of. And in Sealed, I think this guy's a monster. There's only, one card that's going to steal him. in sealed. So I think he's pretty good and very underrated, and I think he will see play. Next up, we got Black Mage, 2 CP backup standard unit for 3 lightning, 3 colorless, tap, break, choose one active forward, dealing 9,000 damage. So at first glance, a lot of people will say this ability looks very expensive, and they're right, it is. However, it's on a 2 CP backup that you can play early game, and you can use an ability like this to just win the game. 9k is going to hit most things, and if you're spending 6 CP to win the game, you probably feel okay. You know, just like you don't really want to cast those 7 CP Odins, but if you have to cast those 7 CP Odins to win the game, you're going to do it. I feel like this kind of falls into that category, except you don't have that EX burst factor. However, you do have that factor that you get an early game backup that's going to produce CP for you. So I don't think it's good enough to see like a lot of play right now, but I can warrant putting like maybe one of these in a deck. Next up, we got Caudill. It's an EX burst, 2 CP summon. Choose one forward you control and one forward opponent controls until the end of the turn. Former gets plus 2,000 power, and the latter loses plus 2,000 power. So this is kind of like a cheaper Cyclops that only targets 2 things. I don't really like this card that much just because I feel like Cyclops is better. I'd rather spend the one extra CP to not target to just deal minus 3k to their whole board instead of just one combat trick for 1 forward. I feel like Cyclops is a combat trick that's almost as good as this, and it helps your attacks after the first attack. So I'm not a big fan of this, but I don't think it's bad. Next up, we got Colossus, a 4 CP monster. For 0 until end of turn, he becomes a forward with 7k, and when he attacks, deal 1,000 to all forwards opponents control. I don't think he's going to see much play. I think he's too expensive for what he does. He combos with like Angel Penance and a few other cards, but it's just not relevant enough right now for I think him to see a slot or play in a deck. So again, I don't think he's awful, but I don't think he's going to see any play in any kind of standard play anytime soon. Next up, we got Cipher. So he's the 2nd lightning legendary. When Cipher is blocked or blocks, choose one forward opponent controls, loses 2,000 power until end of turn. And when he deals damage to your opponent, all your opponent's forwards lose 2,000 power until end of turn. So I think Cipher is actually really good, and I think the whole Cipher package with the disciplinary committee members are actually very good as well. You are forced into win lightning at that point, but you know that's not a bad archetype to be forced into. So he has a lot going on for him. You don't really want to block him because he's gonna trade with 4 CP forwards most of the time, and with his backups online, he's gonna have first strike as well when he's attacking. So that's gonna be really good. Also, when he deals damage, he's like a Marlboro effect. So if you have this guy out with like a Lulu or anything that buffs his power, plus his 2 backups out, he's going to be a problem that you're going to have to address. And at 3 CP, he's pretty cheap, even though he's like 1k under curve. So I think this guy will actually see a ton of play. I think he's really good, and I think the package that he's in is really good. And I myself am definitely going to try it out. Next up, we got the other Cipher. He's a 3 CP, 3k, EX burst. When he enters the field, you may search for one job witch and add it to your hand. The only witch that sees play is 6 CP Adia, really. And usually you want that coming off the top, or you're going to discard it for mana. So I wouldn't want to play a card that searches her out and gets her out of my deck. So, yeah, I think this card's just bad right now until they print other witches that are going to make it more relevant. Next up, we got the 1 CP Summoner. So again, as Chris would say, tinfoil hats. This probably means some sort of rotation is coming, or it just means that they're trying to make sets more sealed and limited friendly. Not much more to say on that. It's a 1 CP backup. Next up, we got 2 CP Ninja backup. It's a standard unit. When it enters the field, choose 1 damage forward, deal it 5,000 damage. I think this is just a worse version of the Black Mage that is 5k power reduction. I would rather play the Black Mage because power reduction is harder to get around than damage. And this requires another card, has already damaged a card in order for you to play it. I don't think this will see any play, and I think it's actually pretty bad. Next up, we got Deep Burn. It's a 1 CP lightning monster. For 1 lightning and 1 colorless, put it in the break zone. Choose 1 forward, cost 3 or less, break it. It's decent. It's recurable with Urion J, which is interesting. I don't think it's really going to fit into a lot of decks right now, per se. but maybe later down the road, it will fit in some decks. And when a rotation does happen, I could see this guy seeing more play for sure. The fact that Urion J does recur him is, I think, what will keep him relevant and maybe make him see play in some decks. Next up, we got for Melba. She's a 4 CP AK Sword Saint Tactics Advance 2 character. When she enters the field, choose one active forward opponent controls. Deal at 4,000 damage for each Sword Saint you control. So the only other relevant Sword Saint right now is Orlando, and you could play like Bartz or something to have access to another Sword Saint or Orator, things like that. I think Orlando might be enough for this card to warrant seeing play. I want to experiment with it a little bit because if you can deal 8k on entry and bring in an 8k body for 4 CP, that seems really good to me. However, if it's just hitting for 4k, it's not as good. So it really just depends on if that combination of cards becomes playable, like actually good. And I don't think it's gonna happen right now, but I think it's worth experimenting for sure. Next up, we got Ewan. He's a 3 CP 5k. If your opponent controls 3 or more forwards, Ewan gains haste and cannot be blocked. So I think a lot of people went crazy over this card and think that it's really good. And I think it's going to be hard for you to fit it in a lot of Lightning decks. Maybe something that's Tactics Advance 2 themed so that you can tutor this guy out and try to swing for game if your opponent overextends. But at the same time, if you're playing like a mono Lightning deck, a lot of times your opponent's field doesn't really get that out of control. And even if they do, they're going to be able to deal with this guy unless they just happen to be on 6 points of damage. So I feel like his use is pretty narrow, and he's a lot worse than a lot of people think. However, I mean, he has the redeeming quality of not being able to be blocked, and he has haste, So maybe he sees some fringe play, but I actually don't think he's that good. Next up, we got Raijin. So he's the last member of that Cipher package. So the card name Cipher you control gains haste, and Raijin special is just S tap. Choose one active forward, deal at 8,000 damage, and you can only use this ability if you control Cipher and Fujin. So if you're playing the whole package, this card's really good. The 2 CP backup. It's just S and tap. You just have to control that whole package out, and you can start sending out AKs. Again, you're probably only going to do that once a game max. So, but given your Cipher haste, it's probably going to be pretty good as well. So I think it'll see play because I think the Cipher package is good. Next up, we got Ramu. It's a 3 CP summon. Select 2 of the following 4. Choose a monster 2 or less break. Choose one forward 4 or less dull. Choose one active forward, deal at 7k. Choose one lightning forward, it gains haste until end of turn. I think this card's insane. I think that it might be the best lightning card that they've printed, and Stinney is really good, don't get me wrong, but I think that this is going to be an instant 3 of in a lot of lightning decks. It just does so much. It's like Doom Train. It's not quite as good as Doom Train, I don't think, but it does some similar things. It's just really crazy. A lot of times you're going to maybe dole something and deal 7k to something else to clear the way for your forwards. It combos with Alcid. If you want to play like Alcid Alua, you can play this on top now and deal 11k without having to play Onion Knight. It deals with monsters if you have to. And sometimes it just gives your guy haste, which can't be bad. So all these are very good options, and I think this will see a ton of play. Next up, we got Ricard. He's a 5 CP Dragoon EX Burst. When he enters the field, you may search for one card named Scott, one card named Minwoo, or one card named Joseph and add it to your hand. Ricard must block if possible, and he's an AK. I think this card's just bad. None of those cards that he's searching out right now are worth running him with those cards. And he has a drawback as well, which just doesn't make sense to me. I'd rather him just be like a 5 CP 7k without the drawback. I don't know. It's just bad. I don't really want to try to defend it much more. I don't think it's going to be good unless some of those cards just become really good. I mean, I guess it does search for a backup in Minwoo and the forward Minwoo, but still, I think it's bad. Next up, we got the 4 CP Dragoon. He's a standard unit, 8k. When Dragoon enters the field, choose one forward against first strike until end of turn. Playable on Dragoons. On curve, does something when it comes in. Not going to see play anywhere else. That's pretty much it. Next up, we got the 2 CP Dragoon. Standard unit, Tactics Advance 2. For each job Dragoon, a card named Dragoon other than Dragoon you control as a tongue twister. Dragoon gains plus 2,000 power. So I do think this one's actually playable because if you can get this online, even if you're just playing like a Stinney and 3 of these, if you get 2 Dragoons out, it's going to be pretty big. If you get 2 Dragoons out and a Stinney, it's going to be pretty big. I think mono lightning decks are going to start running King of Burmecia because of a Stinney, so that lets you tutor this if you already have the Stinney in your hand. So I do think this is going to see some play. I don't know if it's going to be that great, but I want to experiment with it, and I think it has some potential for sure outside of even like a Dragoon deck. So yeah, that's it for Lightning. I think it's got some pretty good cards. I think we're going to see some improvement in some Lightning decks, and I'm interested to see where it goes. I actually think Lightning might be one of the better elements coming out of Opus 6 as far as like what they got. So yeah, that's going to be it for now. So talk to you guys later. See ya.